Good afternoon, everyone. Hello. Thank you for coming to our ICAT Day alumni panel. I am Ashely Costello. I am a graduate research assistant for the Center for Educational Networks and Impacts within ICAT. For them, I help with research and evaluation of our different outreach programs. And for my own personal research, I am focused on working with trauma-impacted college student populations. So I will be moderating our panel today. And then we are going to allow our wonderful panelists to introduce themselves. Thank you so much for joining us.
Sorry for me to hear a little bit. Um, my name is Brennan Bortz. I have a wonderful echo in my ears. I apologize. I was at ICAT. I met Ben when he was far blonder, actually, in at a previous university, and started my PhD work with him there, and then came to ICAT when we started in 2012, I believe it was. I did my PhD in computer science there and studied affective computing, working with exploring human emotional response to musical stimuli. And did research that ultimately turned into more meta research into how to build and man and or woman these large distributed studies of affect in sort of disparate unattended environments. So I finished up in 2019, and now I'm working for a company called Leidos, which is a big federal contractor, doing lots of work from everything from the Antarctic research stations supply chain to hypersonic missiles to marriage and family counseling for vets, all kinds of different things. I'm a solutions architect for that company now. So thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Uh, Afternoon, everyone. I'm Jason Forsyth. I'm an associate professor of engineering at James Madison University. I'm a 2015 graduate of ICAT. My PhD's in computer engineering, but kind of as you can see from the picture up there, there's not a lot of computers. Actually, they are, but they're all hidden. My work and interest was really in sort of rapid prototyping tools for interdisciplinary teams. So I really wanted to get engineers, designers, marketing, architects, like people together to come up with like really crazy and fun ideas and just experience them. And I think a lot of the stuff we saw today kind of with our showcases was emblematic of that. So a couple examples here on the left, we brought some students down from North Cross in Roanoke. We were doing an interactive product design class. In the middle, I've worked on an interactive architecture studio project. So this was in Kogel Hall, and we just had demos throughout the day of interactive installations. And then the last there on the upper right, partnership with the Virginia Tech Transportation Institute for a cardboard derby for kids to experience and understand how connected and smart vehicles would interact. So we had them make their cardboard cars, we put computers and radios on them, and then hid people in the rafters. So every time they bump into each other or do a lap or speed too fast, we'd make it blink or make a noise. So a lot about bringing people together to make cool, fun, interactive spaces.
Hello, everybody. My name is Annie Patrick. I came to Virginia Tech and also into the ICAT Center in 2016 as a science, technology, and studies student. At the time, I was recruited by a lot of the people in ICAT to be on an interdisciplinary grant housed in the EC department, Revolutionizing Engineering Departments, also known as RED. And from there, I got a really great opportunity to work with a lot of great people who also allowed my own interdisciplinarity to really shine and come through. My research really was about how to be an applied social scientist and how to take that knowledge that we get and bring it back to people and to the ground. And part of that was doing these 3 projects, which was supported greatly by the grant and by ICAT. I graduated in December of 2021, where I currently work as a postdoc researcher at Georgia Tech on their interdisciplinary grant in biomedical engineering. So thank you.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, Jason, you might enjoy the picture on the top left. I found it this morning. Hi, everyone. My name is Carrie Zacharias. I came to ICAT at the same time that I came to Virginia Tech, which was in the fall of 2013, just as ICAT, which was had existed for about 2 years at that point, was moving into the, at that time, brand spanking new Moss Arts Center. I joined ICAT largely because Ben had come to my advisor, Matt Wisnowski, looking for, I think, some input, support, information, reflection on what was going on at the Institute. What were they doing? How could they be doing it better? What was some of the context for the work that was going on? So I came in working on the project that way. My PhD is in science and technology studies, same as Annie. And so I ended up doing what was essentially an ethnographic study of ICAT and a study of how art and technology work comes to research universities in the United States and what happens to the work once it's in those spaces and what the experiences are of people who are working within them. Along the way, I helped to paint a mural in the sandbox, that honeycomb or giraffe one that you see up there. I did a lot of maker camps. That's the picture on the side there. The other picture is an image from my dissertation seminar presentation that I gave in sometime in 2017 or 2018. I no longer remember. All those color-coded arrows had very specific meanings behind them that I no longer remember in detail, but this was my attempt to sort of characterize ICAT in a bunch of different ways. I'm now an assistant professor in the Center for Engineering Professional Practice and Engineering Education at the University of Manitoba, which is in Winnipeg, Canada.
Yep, that's me. My name is George Hardebeck. I graduated with an MFA in Creative Technologies in 2019 and did a GA with ICAT during that master's. Did lots of fun stuff with ICAT during that time. We worked with the International Archive of Women in Architecture to build them a touring exhibit that goes into their archive live and can be updated live. They sent me out to Wyoming to see what digging phytosaur skeletons out of the ground is and record that for a VR documentary. And this last one actually happened after I left, but was just really cool. We did a piece for the Corps of Cadets where we projected on Lane Hall, and it was very, lots of content, lots of things to work through, but it ended up being a really visually stunning piece. Now I work for a company called Ideum. We're a leading exhibit design, interactive design firm, and also manufacture and sell our own product line in touch tables, 4K touch tables to museums, cultural centers, and exhibits. Yeah.
Thank you so much for those introductions. Now we're going to move into our panel questions. So our first question is, how do you view the term interdisciplinary? How has this definition evolved over time as you transition from student to professional? And Carrie, if you want to lead that off.
Yes, I would love to. I feel, so as someone who has studied interdisciplinarity, I feel compelled to start with like a somewhat of a scholarly definition, which is to say that I will cite Lisa Latuka and Julie Thompson-Klein and talk about how what often defines interdisciplinarity is the idea of the work or the field that's being talked about being integrative. So all collaborations, even if they involve people from different disciplines with different experiences, are not necessarily interdisciplinary if everyone is kind of working separately or doing their sort of their own distinct pieces of a project and presenting them in that way. That's not necessarily what people like to call interdisciplinarity. The idea is that we're integrating different ideas or concepts or methods or outcomes and synthesizing them and producing something that's kind of new. That's the working definition that I tend to think about. And honestly, I don't think that definition in my mind has changed very much since I was a graduate student, but I think what's changed is the way that I try to go about practicing interdisciplinarity or thinking about how it matters to me. I think that I care less about trying to put things into categories or boxes now. I remember when I first started at ICAT, a lot of people talked about transdisciplinarity and what the difference between interdisciplinarity and transdisciplinarity was, and are we being transdisciplinary? Is transdisciplinary when you have a mathematician and a dancer working together, and interdisciplinary is when you have a mechanical engineer and a civil engineer working together? Like, how do we know what the difference is? I was really into that. I was very like, are you really being transdisciplinary? What does that mean? Can we like figure this out? And like, are you being honest in your description here, or are you just using it as a buzzword? And now I don't care about that anymore, really. I don't care about judging the work that other people do. I care less about worrying about whether the work that I am doing is fitting into that mold or not. I think I care more about the outcomes of the work itself. So I not to say I don't care about interdisciplinarity, but I care less about trying to define exactly what it means and try and fit things into categories. And another thing I think that's changed is that, especially as I've become a professor and started doing educational research to some extent, I'm interested in boundary crossing and integration, I think not only across academic disciplines, but in general across different ways of knowing. I'm interested in knowledge and experience that resides in communities. I'm interested in indigenous knowledges. I'm interested in other ways of understanding the world that go beyond the university department that someone belongs to. I don't know if anyone else wants to pick up on it.
Brennan, do you want to say something before we jump to someone else?
First thing I understood there was, Brennan, do you want to say something? So I'm sorry.
Okay.
I don't have anything brilliant right now. I'm having a tough time hearing, though. I apologize.
Okay. I view it as any time you're working outside of your own discipline. I do that every day. I work with experts from paleobiologists to Boeing, aerospace engineers, designing exhibits that communicate either sales tools or educational goals to a broader audience, to the facilities team who will have to maintain our exhibits every day. I think in academia, interdisciplinary can often be the exception. I found in my life that it's more the rule, how we talk to people who don't know what we know and are experts in, and how we communicate our expertise.
I'll just quickly add, I think I'm along where Carrie ended up on, like, I care less about the definition and more about how you go about it. I think the interdisciplinary aspect of ICAT's taught me new methods. So my work is in wearable computing for physical therapy, and I was like, how do I teach people how to move? And I was like, well, let me just go watch a dance studio. Like, let me go to that other side of the campus and see how those experts tackle that problem. So I think it's given me a particular lens to address certain problems. But yes, it's more about the means to the end rather than what label of a box that you're in.
No, I definitely agree with everybody about looking at how defining it. And I think when I was earlier in my career, it was definitely looking at it and defining it within the discipline and the subject. But then as I got more into it and I started working within these spaces, I realized that it was really more of recognizing people and what they brought and the knowledge they brought and how to make a space for that. Because one thing about being an interdisciplinary scholar or worker is also valuing what everybody is bringing in and making that space open to receive and value all of those different things.
Okay, thank you. So how has being a part of the ICAT community impacted you? What are its influences on your career path and how you approach your work? So Jason, we'll begin with you.
We were just talking about this, kind of the alumni, before we started this panel, and I think ICAT, anyone who's an ICAT, just academically, you're part of a home department, but you're also part of ICAT. And I think I identify first as an ICAT alum, then as an ECE alum. So I think for me, kind of what I said earlier, I think it's given me a different lens and way to view and tackle certain problems. I think I can see things sideways better than I would have before. So I think it's had a very personal effect on me and the work that I pursue. I think another challenge that maybe we'll kind of get into is that though the professional world, depending on the world you enter, doesn't necessarily understand what ICAT is, what interdisciplinarity is. So sometimes I have to revert back and assume that label of a computer engineer. So they go, aha, I understand you. I'm a weird computer engineer. It's land of misfit toys, but like you have to enter with that label first to do it. It's had a tremendous impact on me in valuing the arts and the social sciences and just the things that as an engineer I didn't understand, but I get this orthogonal worldview. And I just enjoy things more and better because of my experiences.
Well, every time I started to feel comfortable at ICAT, they gave me an opportunity to push myself into the uncomfortable. There was never any project that we couldn't try to do. We never knew exactly how the outcome would turn out, but I enjoyed that exploration. The other important part was that even though we were pushing our edge, the staff, students, faculty at ICAT were always supportive and understanding. They gave a really good bed on which to grow. And the work I did as a GA, filming in Wyoming through a very circuitous route, led directly to my employment in museums and exhibits. It's multi-billion-dollar industry that I didn't even know existed when I started college, and I get to have fun every day.
I think it's interesting to think about, to build on what you said, George, to think about work at ICAT as kind of being an exercise in discomfort. I was talking with Jason about this before, and I know that he's always identified, and I remember I think one of the earliest conversations I had at ICAT was with you and Tom, and you were talking about this misfit toys analogy, and I remember thinking at the time, am I a misfit toy? I think I already come from like a weird department and a weird interdiscipline. Science and technology studies, which is the field that my PhD is in, is already interdisciplinary. It comes out of the history and philosophy and sociology of science and technology, and we already work with a mashup of different methods and approaches. And to be honest, I was quite comfortable there. I didn't feel like a misfit. I felt like we were maybe our own little island of social science and humanities misfit toys. And I loved ICAT, and I had a great time here. But for me, it was a really cool space to be in, a place to spend time with people who did very different work than the work that I was doing, but it was never my. Oh, I guess I shouldn't turn my head. I will face the audience. I don't think it was ever my primary home. I always felt like I had two spaces that I was comfortable in. To be very kind of practical and blunt, though, ICAT definitely helped me get a job because I had a social science PhD, and I had an engineering undergraduate background and a bit of engineering work experience before then. But one of the many things that my time at ICAT helped me demonstrate was that I knew how to work with engineers, and I knew how to do some engineering teaching, and that I was comfortable in that specific interdisciplinary space between engineering and the social sciences and humanities, which is the space that I'm working in now.
Brennan?
So I think I've heard some pieces that I'd like to key in on there, but my experience was a little bit different. I came the other way around. So I came from a far too long academic career in music into an engineering field, and I came trying to figure out how to, in my perspective, sort of shoehorn a music uh, uh, research body of research into computer science, because I was my PhD was already underway when I came to ICAT, and I came though I was an experienced software developer, not someone who had studied in an engineering field up to that point. So ICAT was my comfort. It was my place where I could go and feel welcome and not as under the gun, to be able to understand and perform and talk like an engineer as I would be in a CS building, right? And so that was great for me, but it also starts to pick at a little bit of what I think we'll have an opportunity to talk about a little more later, but giving that bubble of doing uncomfortable things, which is comfortable for some people like me, also makes it a little easier to not approach for people who aren't inside that bubble, right? So the people who are just straight up engineers, and I work with them all day and I love them. Uh, as long as ICAT is that thing over there, it's easy to not have to touch that thing over there. And something that I am seeing, and I'll talk about it more in a little bit, but I want more people to almost be pushed into that, and to have to experience some of that, and have to start getting comfortable being uncomfortable, right? But for me, ICAT was my it was my safe haven, I guess you might call it, while I was there. Yeah, thanks.
Be successful, they instead provided this environment which let me just take all of the different things I had done and bring them and make a space for them. And I think that because ICAT is all about being interdisciplinary, that they saw those things and they valued that. And I think I had a conversation with Tom toward the end of my program, and I just remember mentioning like having all these different backgrounds, and was that negative? And I think Tom said to a certain degree that no, that because I had this diverse background, they knew they wanted to bring me on to this project and to this program. And I think because of that, it allowed me to, instead of shedding those things, to really embrace them, and even embrace them moving forward into my next steps.
Thank you. So finding community in higher education can be very difficult. As a person who spans disciplines, how did you find and build beneficial communities? What lessons learned and guidance can you provide to current and future ICAT students? So George will lead off with you.
Thanks. Pretty simple. Put yourself out there. Those who knew me in school know that I applied for every grant that came across my desk, and often I applied for them again the next year. And I often won them because no one else was applying to them. So talk to your departments if you have stuff you want to do. Talk to ICAT. I don't know what their current offerings are, but we used to have quite a lot. And take every opportunity you can to present your work. I'm going to do a little shilling for Phyllis here because that's what I'm used to doing. Among others, ICAT hosts Creativity and Innovation Day, where they have great panelists. Science Fest, and science is bigger than you think. I was an art student. I presented every year. Play dates every Friday, and in previous years, Accelerate Festival. Hopefully someone will take that baton from us in the future. You have to be your own best advocate in this world. Presenting at conferences, at festivals, at events really teaches you how to do that, and the people you meet in those will give you the opportunities that you didn't even know you could get.
I'll say quickly, as someone who is professor and being in higher ed, if you're a student, you have to find your community, your people, because they're the ones that are going to pull you through, and that happens both while you're studying and that both happens afterwards. Like, who are the people that do work like you, that support you, that encourage you? Like, find those people, stick with them, be a part of them, and that's really what's going to see you through your career. They're the ones that are going to be your resources as you go out in the professional world, and you lean on them and you lean on each other. You need that community, and yes, to be found, you have to put yourself out there, like George said. Like, you have to put yourself out there so people know who you are and what you're doing.
I echo everybody. Definitely you have to put yourself out there. The other thing is be patient. It takes time. I just came to Georgia Tech as a postdoc. They were just coming off the COVID restrictions. I'm just now a year in really making those connections. You just have to it takes time, and it does take persistence and just going with it. And then also using your interdisciplinary background to your advantage. I went into a BME department working with learning sciences. I purposely found the other STS scholars or that department and purposely went to their events, connected with them, and just continuing that. When I was a graduate student, I think the biggest thing that was so helpful that I saw is that a lot of students would stay within their own circle, their own discipline, their own department. I really just went out and I had this great experience when I was at Virginia Tech that I had friends in almost every department at this university, and that just really enhanced life, the way you think about things, and it just makes your world so much broad. So even if you're like, maybe this isn't for me, or I may not have something with it, if there's one like cell of you that says, I think there's something here for me, just go with it and just really put yourself out there.
Thank you. So what successes have you had in attempting to navigate interdisciplinary environments? What failures and lessons learned from these experiences are you willing to share? Let's start with Annie.
So you can repeat the question, please.
So what successes have you had in attempting to navigate interdisciplinary environments, and what failures and lessons learned from these experiences are you willing to share?
Okay, so that's a lot. I think one thing is it was a process, and I came through, like I said, when I first started out, my first degree and background was in psychology. I then went into nursing. I did like IT and cybersecurity, and then I came to STS. So I had all of these different things and all of these different experiences. And I think one thing that I had to learn was, one, being interdisciplinary as an individual is very different from being interdisciplinary when you're within a group of people being interdisciplinary. And so the one thing that I had to learn about making it successful for me was probably think about it as a process, and that's stopping and saying, okay, what do I know? What do I bring to this team? What do I contribute? And then also there's this additional work in process of doing the translation. In my work, whether I am talking to people in academia or even sometimes in industry, one of the biggest challenges I have is translating to other people, to other team members, that what I have can contribute in this type of way. Because sometimes when we're within a discipline, we're taught to think one way and we have our own language. So there's this additional work of just, okay, what do they need? What I do, how does it translate over? So like, for example, I first came over to ICAT, I had a methodology that was needed. And so using that methodology to kind of establish myself and bringing that value over was like one of my first things. So it is a process to make it successful.
I'll try to speak to both successes and failures. I'll start with a failure. I blew up on a job interview because they didn't understand what I was. I was presenting my dissertation work, I was presenting my ICAT work, and they're like, wait, what? You're not an engineer, we don't know how to handle you. But I think at other institutions, at other places, they were like, oh, that's cool, you can do X and Y, you can bring things to us. So in terms of successes, I found professional value in it in the places that allow that and admit that and permit it. I mean, at York College, I teamed up with a faculty member to like do an installation. Like, I've never done an art installation. That was really cool. So I've had a lot of personal successes from it, but I think, yeah, there are challenges at times, and it depends on the system you're trying to insert yourself into.
Proud to say I have successes and failures every day, sometimes more of one than the other. What we do when we're designing exhibits for museums is inherently interdisciplinary. Some days I'm working with paleobiologists, some days I'm working with science center experts or historians. I lead at IDEUM both the Unity game engine development team and the AV technology team. We work closely every day with our designers and 3D animators. We work with our clients. We work with the people laying power and data cable in the buildings we're going to install in 6 to 18 months from now. When you're dealing with failures, the best thing is to, move on. You had a failure, figure out how to make it into a solution and a success. And when I'm working with interdisciplinary teams, and I actually learned this from Ben, I ask how I'm wrong all the time. We have a great idea, we want to execute a project, an idea. I am not an expert in every field. I have to ask how I'm wrong and what I'm missing, because some people won't tell you. And then you're there 18 months later, and the power in data is not where you are expecting it. So avoid those situations.
I think I really want to echo something that Jason alluded to, which is finding a space that is a right fit for you, because it is, I mean, particularly speaking to academic experiences, it is really a challenge to navigate academic systems as someone who's sort of across and between disciplines. So right now, I am a faculty member in a school of engineering. I'm one of 3 people within the School of Engineering who does non-traditional engineering research that's in STS, research that's in engineering education, and we're in a kind of weird little unit that's not really a department and is like different from a lot of other spaces within the school in lots of ways. And that is, you know, there's a lot of challenges that come with that, like the ways that our performance gets evaluated. You know, I write papers or bring in grant money at the same rate that other engineering faculty members do. So that's, you know, something to think about. At the same time, I know that there is, you know, I do have a structure. I have this sort of this home within an academic space that has been designed to at least to some extent to work for people like me. I have a dean who sort of understands and is sympathetic to the work that I and my 2 other engineering education, engineering studies researcher colleagues are trying to do. So there are always challenging elements, but there are parts about my job that just wouldn't have been possible in another space. So as much as it's important and valuable to push boundaries in the spaces that you're in, it's also important to find somewhere where you can belong, even if there's sort of work to be done to make it function.
What does the
Brennan,
box
you're up.
say? No, my biggest failure, I think, I jokingly said my dissertation when we were chatting about this earlier, but I really, I had for the first time at work, and I work for a great big company, so it's kind of easy to be a little fish in a big pond. But for the first time a couple of weeks ago, I had someone mention that they pulled down my dissertation, and my heart just sank, and I was absolutely terrified that they'd actually read it. And you know, Ben, you and I have talked about this before, and Jason, you and I chatted about this a little bit earlier. But you know, I look back and I genuinely do struggle to identify what I contributed in my work. And I think that's because if I'm trying to find kind of root cause, um, it's super easy to get out over your skis when you're working in interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary or whatever modifier we're going to use there. Um, and really difficult to scope a problem well. And I struggled with that a lot. And I know that I had the encouragement of people I was working with to think hard about specific places where I wanted to dive deep and other places where I was satisfied to leave things good enough. And I didn't do that well. And what I felt I walked away having contributed was maybe doing good enough in enough places to get the signatures I needed, but ultimately still, you know, with the biggest lesson I took away, I think this keys into kind of what you were saying, Jason, when we chatted, was um, learning the importance of balancing a well-defined problem scope against the sort of drive to get your hands dirty as many places as you can. And that's a real balancing act that I still struggle with to this day, but at least I walked away from my time doing my dissertation research, having learned the necessity of that sort of at the outset of a problem. And I'm regularly faced at work with a big blank canvas, and I chew on this problem every day, and at least now I start to attack those, and they're interdisciplinary problems. They're problems that I need to find a solution for, that draws on management approaches and financial issues and engineering problems, and manufacturing issues and logistics problems, and being able to scope my problem early on is really important. So yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to speak to that a little more because I think something that Brennan said is really important. I think it's really easy when you're doing interdisciplinary work to question the value of the work that you're doing, because it's sometimes hard to find standards by which to judge it. It's sometimes hard to find people that you can talk to about it. It's sometimes hard to find people who appreciate even the work that you're doing. So that's a challenge for sure. But I think it's I found it important to remind myself that those experiences are valuable. I was reminded of this a couple weeks ago at work when I was having a conversation with a wonderful guy who I don't mean to disparage here at all, who's an engineering professor colleague of mine who's also one of the chairs of our Engineering Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee. And we were talking about a book that we had both read that was about racism and sexism on university campuses in Canada. And he said, "This is a really great book, but like professionally, I don't think I can do anything with it because, I just teach thermodynamics." And I was like, well, friend, here is a space for me to contribute something. Like, yes, it's really important that you teach thermodynamics. Also, you're never just teaching thermodynamics. Let's talk about some other parts of the job. Is that, these are important things for you to think about, even if you're not teaching students about anti-racism in your classes. So I guess my point here is just that it can be really easy to question the value of your own work, but sometimes you get very obvious signs. Sometimes you get much more subtle signs about ways in which your intersecting experiences and knowledges can be really valuable.
Thank you. So for my final panel question, some of you now have positions in higher education and others are in positions outside of academia. How have your perspectives changed across roles and environment? And we're going to let Brennan start that one off.
Sure. So I think I touched on this a little bit earlier, but with ICAT being my kind of safe place, right? It was easy to feel like I was surrounded by a lot of people who were, technically had technical proclivities or what, I don't know, but the other people were off doing their vanilla stuff, right? And it was easy to sort of be among my birds of a feather. But now I am in industry, and I am regularly faced with the problem both of hiring good engineers and of being involved in the process of hiring people that aren't in engineering disciplines. And I am constantly battling just finding good engineers in general these days, but finding those people that are ICAT kinds of people, that have a command of their discipline, and sometimes that is just one discipline, but the ability to communicate ideas well to other people that have no idea where it comes from, right? And we're also stuck often looking for those kinds of people, whether they're in finance or they're in HR or they're in, a CTO kind of a position, which sounds technical, but often is not a person that's in the weeds technical, but is a very high level kind of person that needs to engage with those really in the weeds kinds of technical people, but don't have any sort of level of chops in order to be able to do that, right? All things that places like ICAT really help to address, right? Help the engineering kinds of types learn to be able to communicate ideas outside of their comfort zone, and expose people to those kinds of things that may be coming maybe from more the artistic side or the social sciences side, or all of those other places. We are struggling to sort of cross, to bridge that gap all the time, in looking for talent. And it makes me almost feel as if I wish ICAT weren't a place that people like us go. It and maybe things are different. And I'm not bemoaning what it was if it's different, but ICAT draws a certain flavor of person, right? And it's the kind of thing both at Tech and other universities where it's there if you want it. It's there if you want to engage in it. But it's not a forced requirement. And I don't know that I'm going to go all the way and say I think it should be a forced requirement, but the kind of exposure that this kind of community and this kind of work that gets done in this community gives you to other disciplines, to people who think differently than you do, to people who have different styles of communication is super important when you are, if you're going out into industry. And I don't imagine it's all that different in academia as well. I wish that there were, it was less of a place that people like us go and more of a place that Virginia Tech is, and other kinds of institutions. I don't really know how that looks like pragmatically, but man, I wish there were more people like us on in my stacks of resumes that I'm often reviewing. So I don't know if that's useful or not, but yeah, I'll leave it there and see what other folks have to say.
I think I'm probably going to echo a lot of what Brennan said. I'm a hiring manager now. I have teams. So we're a small company, about 40 people. But often technical ability is a baseline. When it comes down to it, I'm going to be spending 40 hours a week if I'm lucky with these people, being able to communicate, being able to describe your needs of your project, of you as a person, so that we can support you, goes a long way. You do need to have that technical ability for the job you're applying for, but those social skills, those communication skills are often a very close second. I think being in interdisciplinary communities really helps you build those skills. It makes it so you learn how to talk about what you do. You learn to talk about what other people do and how they do it. So I think just getting exposure to a lot of different people, a lot of diversity, and a lot of different backgrounds is incredibly valuable, and should be considered part of your training to get into the job force and the workforce.
I think from an academic perspective, coming back here today and tomorrow going back to my home university, I'm going to see the difference. To kind of Brennan's comment, like I'm going to see, like, we have a department where I wish we had more breadth. I wish we had more integrative experiences across all the things. And one of the challenges we have is that higher ed is viewed as a zero-sum game of, like, if credits come here, well, they've got to come from somewhere else. And so I think, to echo Brendan, like, yes, I wish it was just an integrated thing across people's experience. Pure technical depth in one area is going to get you so far, but as we've all been saying, it's these cross-cutting skills that's going to take you the rest of the way. Interfacing with people, learning how to learn, working in unfamiliar and uncomfortable settings is what's going to take you, 20 years. The training you get from college is going to give you 3-4 years. I mean, the rest of it, you're going to have to move on your own.
Adding to what everybody said, I think the other thing to stop and consider, and this may be me speaking in a very hopeful term, is that I think that academia and also industry is slowly but hopefully surely seeing the value of interdisciplinary work, of having just a diverse mindset. When we think about diversity, there's so many ways to look at that, but in addition is to discipline and how we think about that. We think about ICAT being formed with this base of interdisciplinary thought and people, but then even considering the grant that we all worked on, the RED grant, and part of that was putting together an interdisciplinary team where we had engineers, engineering education experts, and social scientists. And I think that's just an indication nationally of the value of when you bring different minds together and give them the space. And I've even seen that format move into other areas. I was recently called into a meeting, and it was for an NIH grant where it was neuro, and they were basically trying to figure out like creating an institute centered around neuroscience. But then once again, I thought this was like amazing. They wanted a social scientist on board. So they had a scholar out of the science and the sociology and history department come on board their grant at Georgia Tech to bring that extra perspective. And I'm starting to see that in other different ways. So my hope is that that will continue to grow as we show the value of it, and especially with technology, because technology is going out, and the people that it's going to connect with are different types of people with different issues and challenges. We need those additional disciplinary backgrounds to bring that in and make sure that we can all answer all those different questions and everybody's taken care of. So I'm hoping, from what I'm seeing, that it continues to grow and it grows in strength, and what we're doing here at ICAT continues to be valued.
I just want to highlight that I think themes that I think have come up in what everyone has just said are the importance of being able to communicate your own work and your own interests to multiple audiences and multiple different groups of people. But I think even more importantly than that, the ability to respect different ways of understanding the world, even if you don't quite understand them. And that was something that I know both of those things were things I was able to practice a lot at ICAT, and I think they both really served me well. Since then, I don't know what I'm doing wrong with the microphone.
Are we taking questions?
That's right. Aren't these panelists amazing? I want to take just a second to thank you all, of course. Do we have questions from the panelists? We have got time for maybe just a couple before we do our awards ceremony. Lisa's got one. See, it's not just you, Carrie. I just did it to me.
So I heard you say several words of advice and comfort and encouragement to students. What about faculty and administrators? Feel free to go straight to the top.
I think in higher ed, it's really, I don't know who set up ICAT at Virginia Tech, but I imagine whoever that group was took a risk, right? They rolled the dice. They said, let's build this building. Let's fill it with crazy things. Let's do work that no one's even thinking of. And I think that takes a certain kind of leadership that is rare and tough in higher ed, which I think is conservative, because it's like, well, what are we going to get out of it? What are we going to measure? I think this comes all the way down to how administrations are done, and budgets, and promotion and tenure requirements. Like, everyone's going to do the most conservative thing they can to get where they need. So I hope that maybe if you wanted to see things like this, those elements can be opened up. We can take more risk. We can see those things happen, because, I mean, again, when ICAT opened, I was like, what, we're going to have a 4-story black box? Why? And now you see, like, how visionary and how awesome that was. And so you have to be able to take a risk, which I think is sometimes antithetical to higher ed a little bit. Annie? Yeah.
Very good question. I will speak from my own experience, and I think some of that goes back to one of the earlier questions with how do you build community? And my answer to that was you really just have to put yourself out there. And now being in this postdoc position where I'm no longer a student, that still holds true. I have to put myself out there. And then the other thing that I recognize is that when I'm being this interdisciplinary person and having this background, and especially being a social scientist at a school that is very, very, very heavily involved and invested in technology, I represent social science. And it's really taken every opportunity you can to really show the value of what you do. And maybe I got lucky with a little bit of the work. So for example, currently at Georgia Tech, somebody got wind of the research that I was doing in their department with their students. It went to like the assistant dean of a certain like department area. We had a sit down. I told him about my research, And lately, every time something's coming up, he brings me in for these conversations, and he says point blank, I want the social science approach. He's like, I want to know what you think. And I'm sitting in a room with engineers, basically, who are valuing the rigor and this linear thinking and all these different things we all know about engineering, which is great. But it's also that I was able to communicate, this is what I'm doing for the students, and this is what social science brings to the table, and see the value of it. And then thankfully, this person was able to see the value of it. And now I'm in these meetings where I'm representing the social science, and I'm showing where, hey, when you bring these other perspectives in, all of these different things open up, and you can see it in a more complete way. So it's also about timing, representing, and just bringing that value, because you have the value in everything you do. It's just bringing it.
Just really quick, if anyone ever asks you why to build a 4-story black box theater, send them my way. I have a list. Okay. Maybe a different kind of response, but just those personal connections with your students are incredibly important, and they last. Every kind of good opportunity I've had has come from a personal connection with faculty, either pointing me in the right direction, inviting me in, something like that. That's all I would say.
I was trying to decide how hot of a take I want to deliver on that question, and I think I've gone with medium hot, which is, or maybe not, but I totally agree with what Annie's saying about the sort of the importance of making a case for the social sciences and the humanities and the arts, I think, although she didn't talk about that. But I also think that we shouldn't have to do that. Like, I think administrators honestly should be doing that, should be recognizing the value of fields that are not science and engineering fields. We were talking this morning a little bit about acronyms, like science, engineering, art, and design as SEED or STEAM. And I was talking about how much I hate STEAM, even though I really value art and technology work itself. And that's mostly because it's for a bunch of reasons, but because it positions the arts as subordinate to STEM fields, because it groups science, technology, engineering, and math, which is a huge swath of some like pretty radically different types of research, into one thing, and kind of implicitly positions them as above other kinds of work. And I don't like that, and I know that everyone like on this panel certainly, and probably in the room, agrees with me about that. But if you're asking about a message to administrators in particular, it's value the humanities, value the arts, value the social sciences, value them as part of interdisciplinary work and on their own.
Brendan, did you want to add something there?
I'm afraid I have a very hot take, and it only has to do with Microsoft versus Google right now. So I'm going to keep it to myself. That's all I got.
Other questions? All right, well, we will give a giant round of applause to this great group of panelists.
Be angry.
That's perfect. Be angry. That's perfect. Well, I'll wrap us up with how lovely it is to have this group of humans and the one box. It's good. Back. These are folks who really kind of kicked off ICAT and then kept it going through the years. And as I look at that cornerstone, I walk in the morning and it says 2013, and that used to be really new. But it's been a decade. Wow. So it's just lovely to be able to see what's happening with you all, and how this work goes beyond. After you spent some time at ICAT, what happens after that? And now people ask me a lot with the outreach work that I do, like, how do you know if it's working? And my answer is, I'll tell you in 30 years, because we got to see what they do with their lives. So we're like a third of the way in. This is great. Thanks, y'all. I want to thank everybody also for coming to ICAT Day today, ICAT Creativity and Innovation Day, over at the Moss Art Center and throughout some other places on campus as well. We close out ICAT Day with, of course, our panel discussion, so thank you all. And also, there are some awards for exhibits that happened today. We have 3 awards to give out today. for 3 exhibitors that went above and beyond in their quest to educate and inspire. The first award is the People's Choice Award. This is based on feedback from people who came to the event. There were QR codes at each table, and folks were able to scan those QR codes and make their votes. So without further ado, let me present this award to Modeling Smart Grid Functionality and Cybersecurity. Dennis Grouchton, you want to come up and get your award? You can send a student if you Wait a minute. Let me get I should have got my clipboard ready. Congratulations.
Students, you're the greatest.
That's right. So quickly, if you're part of that project, would you stand up?
Yeah.
Let's give these folks a big round of applause. This is. Thank you. And you have a People's Choice Award to share. Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Let me say that quickly that part of our work at CENI, the Center for Educational Networks and Impacts, is bringing schools and museums and together with what's happening at Virginia Tech. And so thanks to the work of Dr. Grouchton and our Montgomery County liaison and a number of other administrators and folks in the Montgomery County schools, thank you all for making that work. These folks are high school students who are participating in an internship with a grant-funded project at Virginia Tech, and it's just a really great opportunity, so thank you for making that so. And the people voted, so good work, y'all. All right, the second one is the Judge's Choice, and this is based on 30-second videos that the exhibitors presented and put online. So the ICAT Advisory Board are folks who are outside of ICAT and movers and shakers in the world of ICAT things, but outside Virginia Tech. And they watched those videos and sent in their thoughts on those. So I would like to congratulate the folks from Mecca Collaboration. Congratulations. Oh, good. Yes, you're here. And that is RJ Weaver. And RJ, will you help me with your colleagues' per name?
Yeah, Shokafe, Bozig Megrian. Yeah.
There you go. Good, thank
She's
you.
not here today, but she would love to accept the award as well. So thank you.
Well, congratulations. Let me get your. I have to. Let me get the right one. And finally, the third and last award is the Museum's Choice. So one of the cool things that happens at ICAT Day is people who direct museums will come to ICAT Day. Some of them actually go shopping. George, for example, has one of his first ICAT days. The Science Museum of Western Virginia was here and walked through and said, well, that's really cool. And a few months later, we installed it at the museum. So it is surprisingly, just barely. But yeah, so we did have folks from several museums with us today, and we asked each of them to tell us their favorites of the exhibits that they saw. And we looked for where those things came together. So I'd like to present the Museum's Choice Award today to Playing COVID Proteins with Deborah Good, Shannon Morrow, and Charles Nichols. Congratulations. And I don't think we have a rep from that group here with me, but we'll get it, and we'll take a picture when they get their things as well. So what a fun day we've had. I want to thank you all again for sitting through the awards part as well. You all are super patient as we do all those things, and I hope that you've come away from today with some new ideas, some new thoughts to think, some new ways to bring disciplines together, some new technologies that you hadn't thought about before. And so our next step, following this, we're going to have some refreshments here. So please enjoy those. And right after that, I hope that you will spend some time in this wonderful space in the Creativity Innovation District Residence Hall. The Rhizome Living Learning Community has been working all semester on their transdisciplinary projects, and those students will be here shortly to share their projects. So I hope you'll hang around for a while for that too. And thank you, and have a fabulous rest of your semester. All right. Thank you, Ashley. All right, so I'm gonna give that. Bye, Brennan. Bye, Brennan.